When a black man poorly dressed enters a restaurant to ask for a table, the waiter denies him and insults him for his skin color. But he could never imagine what was about to happen to him, because the man is secretly the owner of the restaurant. The air crackled with heat as Marcus's lips grazed Simone's neck, her breath hitching in the dim glow of the restaurant's private booth. Her fingers clutched the edge of the table, nails digging into the polished wood, while his hand slid up her thigh, the silk of her dress whispering under his touch. The scent of saffron and roasted lamb hung heavy, mingling with the musk of their shared desire. She tilted her head back, eyes half-lidded, and let out a low, throaty laugh that vibrated through him. "You're insatiable tonight," she murmured, her voice a velvet blade slicing through the tension. His reply was a growl, deep and possessive, as he pressed himself closer, the world shrinking to just the two of them. But then the booth's curtain ripped open and the spell shattered. Two figures loomed, sharp-edged, sneering, their voices jagged with venom. "You don't belong here," one spat, a wiry man with a buzz cut, his eyes glinting like broken glass. "Take your hands off her and get out before we call the cops." The other barked, a stocky woman with a sneer curling her lip. Marcus froze, his hand still on Simone's thigh, the heat of passion curdling into something darker. Simone's laugh died, replaced by a sharp inhale, her body tensing against his. "Excuse me?" Marcus's voice was low, lethal, but they didn't hear the warning. "You heard us," the man snapped, stepping closer. "This ain't your kind of place." The woman grabbed Simone's arm, yanking her from the booth, and Marcus lunged, only to be shoved back. "Out!" they roared in unison, dragging the couple toward the door as the restaurant's hum turned to a stunned hush. The night unraveled from there. A thread pulled too tight, snapping under the weight of rage and betrayal. Marcus stood outside, the cool Los Angeles breeze, doing nothing to quench the fire in his chest. His tailored suit now wrinkled from the scuffle, a faint tear at the cuff where Tyler's bony fingers had clawed at him. Simone clutched his arm, her heels clicking against the pavement in a staccato rhythm of fury, her eyes blazing with a wrath that mirrored his own. "They don't know who you are," she hissed, her voice trembling with indignation, the words sharp as broken glass. "They will," he promised, his tone a blade honed to cut, each syllable dripping with the certainty of a man who'd never bent to the world's weight. Inside, the two employees, Tyler and Paige, ignorant of the storm they'd unleashed, returned to their posts, smirking as if they'd won some petty victory. They had no idea the man they'd just thrown out was Marcus Jackson, the CEO of Saffron and Silk, the very restaurant they'd been hired to serve. Nor did they suspect the woman they'd manhandled was his wife, Simone, a force as formidable as he, her presence, a quiet thunder that could shake foundations. The lawsuit would come swift and merciless, a legal guillotine poised to sever their livelihoods. But first, Marcus would fire them himself, savoring the moment their arrogance crumbled into dust. This wasn't just revenge, it was a reckoning, a declaration that the empire he'd built would not bow to the small-minded venom of those too blind to see its worth. The story didn't begin here, though. It didn't start with the clash of bodies, the sting of racial venom, or the bitter taste of humiliation that lingered on their tongues. It began hours earlier, under a sky streaked with the golden hues of dusk, when Marcus decided to take Simone to his restaurant. Not as the untouchable CEO who'd carved his name into the city's skyline, but as a man hungry for his wife's company, craving the simplicity of her laughter and the heat of her gaze. The shift from that tender beginning to this brutal confrontation was a mystery even to him, a puzzle of passion and prejudice he'd pieced together only in hindsight. But for now, the night pulsed with the raw energy of what had just happened, and the promise of what was to come, a collision of love, power, and retribution that would echo far beyond this single evening. 400 words in, the narrative rewinds, peeling back the layers of the evening to reveal the origins of this explosive encounter. Marcus Jackson, at 42, was a man carved from ambition and resilience. His skin a rich mahogany that gleamed under the soft lights of his empire, a testament to a life spent defying the odds stacked against him. Saffron and Silk wasn't just a restaurant. It was his legacy. A monument to years of clawing his way up from a cramped apartment in South Central, where the air smelled of asphalt and desperation, to the penthouse suites of Century City, where the world bent to his will. His broad shoulders filled out a bespoke charcoal suit, the fabric hugging his frame like a lover's embrace, tailored to perfection by a man who'd once stitched his own torn clothes with a needle and thread borrowed from a neighbor. His eyes, dark, piercing, held a quiet intensity that commanded any room, a gaze that could shift sheer warmth to steel in an instant. Simone, 38, was his equal in every way, her beauty a weapon she wielded with precision, honed through years of navigating a world that sought to diminish her. Her skin glowed like burnished copper, her curves draped in a crimson silk dress that clung to her like a second skin, accentuating every sway of her hips with a grace that was both deliberate and effortless. Her hair, a cascade of tight curls, framed a face that could shift from sultry to severe in a heartbeat, her full lips parting to reveal a smile that could disarm or destroy. Together, they were a power couple, their love a dance of fire and steel, forged through years of shared triumphs and unspoken battles. They'd met 15 years earlier, at a fundraiser for a community center in Compton, where Marcus had been a rising entrepreneur with a catering business barely off the ground, and Simone had been a paralegal with dreams of law school, her sharp mind cutting through the room's noise like a beacon. He'd offered her a plate of his signature saffron-spiced chicken, and she'd taken it with a smirk, saying, "If this is as good as you think it is, I might let you buy me a drink." It was better than good. It was a revelation, and the drink turned into a night of conversation that stretched into dawn, their connection sparking like flint on stone. Since then, they'd built a life together, brick by brick, their partnership a fortress against a world that often saw their skin before their souls. That evening, Marcus had watched her from across their sleek, penthouse kitchen, a space of gleaming marble and stainless steel that reflected their success. She stood by the counter, her laughter spilling over as she sipped a glass of Pinot Noir, the deep red liquid catching the light like a jewel, her bare feet pressed against the cool floor, a rare moment of vulnerability that made his chest ache with something fierce and tender. "Let's go to Saffron tonight," he'd said, his voice a low rumble that stirred something primal in her, the sound reverberating through the quiet space. She'd arched a brow, setting the glass down with a clink that echoed like a challenge. As the boss or as a customer? He'd grinned, a rare flash of teeth that softened his stern features, the lines of his face easing into something boyish. "Customer. I want to see it through your eyes." It was a whim, a chance to shed the weight, his title, and revel in the intimacy of anonymity, to step out of the armor he wore as CEO and into the man he was with her. Simone had slipped into her dress, the silk whispering promises against her skin as she moved, and he'd pulled her close, hands roaming her back, fingers tracing the curve of her spine as he breathed her in. Jasmine and defiance, her scent as intoxicating as the wine, a fragrance that had haunted him since their first night together. The drive to Saffron and Silk was a quiet seduction, the hum of the Bentley's engine underscoring their shared glances, the city unfurling around them like a lover's secret. Los Angeles sprawled before them, a glittering beast of a city, its lights winking like stars fallen to earth. A tapestry of ambition and excess. Marcus's hand rested on her knee, his thumb tracing lazy circles that sent shivers up her spine, a touch that spoke of years of knowing her body as well as his own. "Your trouble," she'd teased, her voice a purr that wrapped around him like smoke, and he'd chuckled, the sound rich and warm, filling the car with a heat that rivaled the engine's purr. "Only for you," he'd replied, his eyes flicking to hers, dark pools that held a promise of more than just dinner. They'd arrived at the restaurant just as the dinner rush peaked, the exterior a sleek marvel of glass and steel, its name glowing in elegant script above the entrance. A beacon of everything he'd fought to create. Inside, the air was thick with the aromas of cumin, garlic, and seared meat. The decor a blend of modern opulence and earthy tones, deep browns, golds, and reds that mirrored the couple's own vibrancy, a space that felt like an extension of their souls. Marcus had chosen the private booth at the back, a secluded nook shrouded by heavy velvet curtains, perfect for the intimacy he craved that night. The hostess, Carla, a veteran who'd been with him since the days when Saffron and Silk was just a food truck parked on Crenshaw Boulevard, greeted them with a knowing smile, her eyes flicking between them as she led them through the bustling dining room. Her graying hair was pulled into a tight bun, her uniform crisp, and her presence a quiet anchor in the chaos of the restaurant. "Enjoy yourselves," she'd said, her tone laced with affection, a nod to the years she'd watched them grow from a scrappy duo to the titans they were now, before disappearing into the fray. Marcus and Simone settled in, the world beyond the curtains fading as they leaned into each other, their knees brushing under the table, a current of electricity sparking between them. The meal was a slow seduction. Lamb drizzled with saffron-infused honey, the meat tender and rich, paired with a bottle of aged Bordeaux that stained their lips red, each sip deepening the haze of desire that enveloped them. Each bite was a shared secret, each glance a promise, their hands finding each other across the table, fingers intertwining as the night deepened into something electric. They spoke in low tones, their conversation a tapestry of memory and longing. Simone recounted a story from their early days when Marcus had burned a batch of cornbread, trying to impress her mother, the kitchen filling with smoke as he cursed, and she laughed, her mother's stern face softening into a rare smile. "You won her over anyway," Simone said, her eyes glinting with amusement. "That's my superpower," he'd replied, his voice a velvet growl, winning over the women who matter. She'd laughed, the sound a melody that danced through the booth, and he'd watched her, marveling at how she could still unravel him after all these years. The wine flowed, the food melted on their tongues, and the world outside their cocoon ceased to exist, until the curtains parted with a violent swish, and the night shattered. Tyler and Paige stormed in, their presence an intrusion that sliced through the haze of desire like a jagged blade. Tyler was wiry, his buzz cut giving him the look of a soldier gone rogue, his pale skin flushed with a mix of adrenaline and disdain. Paige was stocky, her sneer a permanent fixture on a face that might have been pretty if not for the hardness in her eyes. Her blonde hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. They were new hires, barely a week into their probationary period, and they didn't know Marcus from any other patron to them. He and Simone were just another black couple, encroaching on a space they'd decided didn't belong to them. Their prejudice a venom distilled from ignorance and entitlement, a poison that had no place in the sanctuary Marcus had built. "You don't belong here," Tyler snarled, his voice cutting through the air, sharp and ugly, his hands already reaching for Marcus's arm. Paige grabbed Simone's wrist, her grip bruising, and yanked her from the booth with a force that made Simone gasp, her wine glass tipping over, the red liquid spilling across the table like blood. Marcus surged forward, his instincts roaring, his body a coiled spring ready to strike, but Tyler shoved him back, the force sending a jolt through his frame, his shoulder slamming against the booth's wooden edge. The restaurant fell silent, diners craning their necks, staff freezing mid-step, as the couple was dragged toward the exit, the velvet curtains swaying in their wake. Marcus's mind raced, a storm of disbelief and fury, his hands clenching into fists as he fought the urge to swing, knowing the optics would only fuel their narrative. Simone struggled against Paige's hold, her heels skidding on the polished floor, her voice rising in a sharp, "Let go of me," tat through the stunned hush. The other patrons watched, some with wide eyes, others with phones raised, capturing the chaos as if it were a spectacle to be dissected later. Carla appeared at the edge of the dining room, her face a mask of shock, her hands wringing together as she mouthed Marcus's name. But she was too far to intervene. The employee's aggression was a violation, a betrayal of everything saffron and silk stood for: elegance, inclusion, a defiance of the world's assumptions, and it burned in Marcus's chest like a brand. Outside, the night air hit them like a slap, the humiliation burning hotter than their earlier passion, a bitter wind that carried the distant hum of traffic and the faint scent of exhaust. Simone's eyes glittered with unshed tears, not of weakness but of rage. Her hands balled into fists at her sides, her breath coming in sharp bursts. "They didn't even ask," she said, her voice trembling with the weight of it, the injustice of being judged and discarded without a word. Marcus's jaw tightened, his mind already racing toward retribution, his pulse a war drum in his ears. "They'll regret it," he vowed, pulling her close, her body trembling against his, her warmth a lifeline in the storm of his anger. He could feel the tension in her frame, the way she held herself together despite the bruise blooming on her arm, a mark that fueled his resolve. The employee's ignorance was no excuse. Their actions were a stain on his vision, a crack in the foundation he'd poured his life into, and he would not let it stand. The next morning, Marcus sat in his office atop the restaurant, the city sprawling below him like a conquered kingdom, its towers glinting in the early light. The room was a study in power. Mahogany desk polished to a mirror sheen, leather chairs that creaked with authority, a wall of awards and framed articles glinting in the sunlight, each one a testament to his climb. A photo of him and Simone at the restaurant's opening hung above the desk, Her arm looped through his, their smiles radiant against the backdrop of a crowd that had cheered their triumph. He stared at it now, the memory a stark contrast to the night before, his fingers drumming a restless rhythm on the desk. Simone paced beside him, her heels clicking against the hardwood, her crimson dress swapped for a tailored blazer and skirt that screamed authority, her curls pulled back into a severe bun that sharpened her features. "We sue them," she said, her voice a whip crack that snapped him from his reverie. "Racial discrimination, assault, defamation, everything." Her words were a battle plan, precise and unyielding, and he nodded, his fingers steepled as he dialed his lawyer, Evelyn Pierce, a shark in a pinstripe suit who'd never lost a case for him. "File it today," he told her, his tone cold. "A blade wrapped in silk. I want their names ruined." Evelyn's voice crackled through the speaker. All business, her confidence a steel thread. "Consider it done." But the firing came first, a ritual of retribution he needed to perform with his own hands. Marcus called Tyler and Paige into his office that afternoon, the summons delivered by Carla with a gleam of satisfaction in her eyes. Her loyalty a quiet fire that had never wavered. They shuffled in, Tyler's bravado faltering as he took in the room, his hands shoved into his pockets. Paige's sneer fading as she saw Marcus behind the desk, his presence filling the space like a storm cloud rolling in from the sea. "You're the sea," Tyler stammered, his voice cracking, his eyes darting to the awards on the wall as if they could rewrite the night before. Marcus leaned forward, his gaze unyielding, a predator sizing up prey. Ear fired. Paige opened her mouth to protest, her face flushing red. But he cut her off, his voice rising like thunder. "You assaulted my wife. You humiliated us. You don't get a second chance." The security team, two broad-shouldered men in black suits, stepped forward, summoned by a flick of Marcus's hand, and escorted them out. Their protests echoing down the hall, a pitiful chorus that faded into silence. Marcus watched, a grim satisfaction settling in his chest, the first taste of justice sharp on his tongue. The days that followed were a whirlwind of preparation, a war waged on paper and in whispers. Evelyn arrived at the penthouse that evening, her briefcase stuffed with documents, her sharp eyes scanning the couple as they sat on the leather sectional, a glass of bourbon in Marcus's hand, a cup of tea in Simone's. "We've got them dead to rights," she said, spreading the security footage stills across the coffee table. Tyler's shove, Paige's grip, the spilled wine a crimson accusation. Witness statements from the staff and diners corroborate everything. They won't wriggle out of. Simone leaned forward, her fingers tracing the edge of a photo, her voice low. "I want them to feel it, the way we did." Evelyn nodded, her lips curling into a faint, predatory smile. "They will. I'm asking for punitive damages, emotional distress, the works. We'll bury them." Marcus sipped his bourbon, the burn grounding him, his mind already envisioning the courtroom, the moment their smugness would shatter. The lawsuit hit the courts, a week later. A meticulously crafted assault that left no room for mercy. Evelyn presented the security footage in stark clarity, the grainy images projected on a screen for the judge and gallery to see. Tyler's aggression, Paige's brutality, the couple's dignity stripped away in seconds. Witness statements followed. A parade of voices, Carla's steady recounting, a diner's outraged testimony, a server's quiet shame at not intervening. The couple's legal team painted a picture of systemic bias of two employees who'd assumed Marcus and Simone were intruders because of their race, not their roles, their actions a microcosm of a larger rot. The damages sought were astronomical, financial ruin for the defendants, a public apology splashed across every news outlet, and a donation to a civil rights charity in Saffron and Silk's name, a symbolic cleansing of the stain they'd left. Tyler and Paige, unprepared and outmatched, floundered in court, their defenses crumbling under Evelyn's relentless cross-examination, her questions sharp as scalpels, peeling back their excuses to reveal the raw prejudice beneath. In the courtroom, Marcus sat beside Simone, his hand resting on hers, their unity a silent rebuke to the chaos they'd endured. The judge, a stern woman with gray-streaked hair and a no-nonsense demeanor, listened as Evelyn dismantled the employee's claims, her rulings swift and decisive, her gavel a punctuation mark on each blow. Tyler took the stand, his voice trembling as he tried to justify his actions. "They looked out of place, I was just doing my job," and Evelyn pounced, her tone icy. out of place in a restaurant they own. Your job was to serve, not to judge. Paige fared no better, her defiance melting into stammers as Evelyn pressed her on the bruise she'd left on Simone's arm, the footage replayed in slow motion for effect. When the verdict came, guilty on all counts, damages awarded in full, the room buzzed with shock and approval, a ripple of murmurs spreading through the gallery. Tyler's face drained of color, his hands gripping the table as if it could anchor him. Paige's head dropped, her shoulders slumping in defeat. Marcus felt a surge of triumph, tempered by the weight of what it had cost to get here. The sleepless nights, the whispered doubts, the memory of Simone's trembling rage. The aftermath was a slow burn, a reclamation of what had been tarnished. Back at Saffron and Silk, the restaurant thrived, the incident a dark footnote turned into a rallying cry. Marcus and Simone stood together at the helm, their bond forged anew in the crucible of betrayal and victory, their presence a beacon for the staff and patrons alike. They hosted a press conference the following week. The dining room packed with reporters, the air thick with the scent of saffron and the hum of anticipation. Marcus stood at the podium, his suit impeccable, his voice steady as he recounted the night, his words a measured blend of pain and power. "This isn't just about us," he said, his gaze sweeping the room. "It's about every person who's been told they don't belong, who's been judged by the color of their skin instead of the content of their character. Saffron and Silk is a promise that no one will be turned away from this table." Simone stood beside him, her hand on his arm, her eyes fierce as she added, "We fought for this place and will fight for everyone who walks through its doors." The donation to the civil rights charity was announced that day, a 7-figure sum that drew gasps from the crowd, a gesture that cemented their legacy. The public apology from Tyler and Paige, mandated by the court, came in the form of a stilted video posted online, their voices flat, their eyes averted, a hollow victory that Marcus watched with a flicker of disdain. The restaurant's reputation soared, reservations booked months in advance. The story of their stand against prejudice, a magnet for those who craved both exquisite food and a deeper meaning. Carla took on a larger role, her loyalty rewarded with a promotion to manager, her steady hand guiding the staff through the transition. The booth where it all happened was reframed as a symbol, a plaque added to the wall, a seat for all, claimed by courage. At home, Marcus and Simone rebuilt the intimacy the night had fractured. They sat on their penthouse balcony one evening, the city a sea of lights below, a bottle of Bordeaux between them echoing that fateful dinner. She leaned against him, her head on his shoulder, her voice soft. "Tide, we turned it around, didn't we?" He kissed her forehead, his lips lingering on her skin. "We always do." The scar of that night lingered, a faint ache that fueled their resolve. But it was overshadowed by the strength they'd reclaimed. They'd turned passion into power, rage into redemption, and the world would never forget it. The years that followed saw Saffron and Silk expand, new locations sprouting in New York, Chicago, and Miami, each one a testament to their vision. Marcus and Simone became icons, their story a touchstone in discussions of race, resilience, and retribution, their faces gracing magazine covers and TED Talk stages. But at the core they remained the couple who'd laughed over burned cornbread, who'd built an empire from a shared plate of chicken, who'd faced the world's venom and emerged unbroken. The night they'd been thrown out was a distant memory, a spark that had ignited a blaze, and they carried its heat with them, a fire that would never dim.